Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange, Chapter 3. We yacketed back townwards, my brothers, but just outside, not from what they called the industrial canal. We vided the fuel needle had collapsed, like our own ha-ha-ha night needles had, and the auto was coughing kish kish kish. Not to worry over much though, because our rail station kept flashing blue, on off, just near. The point was whether to leave the auto to be sobriated by the roses, or us feeling like in a hate and muddied mood, to give it a fair toll check into the starry waters for a nice heavy loud plesk before the death of the evening. This latter we decided on, so we got out and the brakes off, all four toll-checked it to the edge of the filthy water that was like trestle mixed with human hull produces. Then one good horror show toll-check and it went. We had to dash back for fear of the filth splashing on our platies, but splosh and glop she went, down and lovely. Farewell, old Droog, called Georgie, and Dim obliged with a clowny great guff. Ha 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 ha. Then we made for the station to ride the one-stop to centre, as the middle of the town was called. We paid our fares nice and polite, and waited gentlemanly and quiet on the platforms, old Dim filling with the slot machines, his commas being full of small Malanky coin, and ready if needed be to distribute chalk bars to the poor and starving, though there was none such about. And then the old espresso rapido came lumbering in, and we climbed aboard, the train looking to be near empty. To pass the 3-minute ride, we filled about with what they called the upholstery, doing some nice horror show tearing out the seat's guts, and old Dim chaining the Ocano till the glass cracked and sparkled in the winter air. But we were all feeling that bit shagged and fagged and fashed, it having been an evening of some small energy expenditure, my brothers, only Dim like the clowny animal he was, full of the joys of, but looking all dirtied over to, and too much one of sweat on him, which was one thing I had against Dim. We got out at centre and walked slow back to the Krovka milk bar, all going yaw Malanky bit and exhibiting to moon and star and lamplight our back fillings, because we were still only growing Melcheks and had school in the daytime. And when we got into the Krova, we found it fuller than when we'd left earlier on. But the Chelchevek that had been burbling away in the land on White and Synthesek or whatever was still on at it, going, urchins of dead cast in the way, ho hey, Gil platonic time weatherborn. It was probably that this was his third or fourth lot that evening, for he had that pale and human look, like he'd become a thing, and like his lister was really a piece of chalk carved. Really, if he wanted to spend so long in the land, he should have gone into one of the private cubies at the back, and not stayed in the big mesto, because here some of the Melchchicks would filly about with him a Malanky bit, though not too much, because they were powerful bruised boys hidden away in the old Krova, who would stop in any riot. Anyway, Dim squeezed in next to this Vec, and with his big clown's yawp that showed his hanging gape, he stabbed the Vec's foot with his own large filthy subog. But the Vec, my brothers, heard not, being now all above the body. It was Nadstats mostly milking and cooking and fiddling around. Nadstats were what we used to call the teens, but there were a few of the more starry ones, Vex and Chinas alike, but not of the bourgeois, never them, laughing and goverretting at the bar. You could tell from their barberines and loose platies, big starry sweaters mostly, that they'd been on rehearsal at the TV studios round the corner. The Duchesses among them had those very lively listos and wide big rots, very red, showing a lot of teeth and smacking away and not caring about the wicked world one whit. And then the disc on the stereo twanged off and knocked out. It was Johnny Zhivago, a Rusky Koshka, singing Only Every Other Day. And in the interval, the short silence before the next one came on, one of these Dubchicas, very fair and with a big smalling red rot, and in her late 30s, I'd say, suddenly came with a burst of singing, only a bar and a half, and as though she was giving an example of something they'd all been governing about. And it was for a moment, oh my brothers, some great bird had flown into the milk bar, and I felt all the little Malenki hairs on my plot standing endwise, and the shivers crawling up like slow Malenki lizards, and then down again, because I knew what she sang. It was from an opera by Friedrich Gutterfenster called Du Brestbring, and it was the bit where she's snuffing it with her throat cut, and she slavos up better like the maybe. Anyway, I shivered. But old Dim, as soon as he sloshied and dollop a song like a lunatic of red-hot meat plonked on your plate, let off one of his vulgarities, which in this case was a lip trump followed by a dog howl, followed by 2 fingers pronging twice at the air, followed by a clowny guffaw. I felt myself all of a fever and drowning in red-hot blood, sloshing in Vidian Dim's vulgarity, and I said, "A bastard! Filthy, drooling, mannerless bastard!" Then I leaned across George, who was between me and horrible Dim, and fisted Dim slowly on the rot. Dim looked very surprised, his rot open, wiping the cravy off of his gobber with his rook, and in turn looking surprised at the red flowing cravy and at me. "What for did you do that for?" he said in his ignorant way. Not many viddied what I'd done, and those that viddied came not. The stereo was on again and was playing a very sick electronic guitar veshish. I said, "For being a bastard, and no manners, and not on the duck of an idea how to comport yourselves public-wise, oh my brother." Dim put on a hound and horny look of evil, saying, "I don't like you should do what you done then, and I'm not your brother no more, and you wouldn't want be." He'd taken a big, snotty tush-tuck from his pocket, and was mopping the red flow, puzzled, keeping on looking in at the flowing as if he'd thought that blood was for other vex and not for him. It was like he was singing blood to make up for his vulgarity when that Dubchika was singing music, but that Dubchika was smecking away, now, for her droogs at her bar, her red rot working and her zoobies a-shine, not having noticed Dim's filthy vulgarity. It was me, really, Dim had done wrong. Too, I said, "If you don't like this, and you wouldn't want that, then you know what you to do, little brother." Georgie said in a sharp way that made me look. "All right, let's not be starting. Let's clean up to Dim. Dim can't go on all his geesening being in his little child," and I looked sharp at Georgie, Dim said, and the red coffee was easing its flow now. "What natural right does he have to think that he can give the orders and check me whenever he likes?" "Yarbles is what I say to him, and I chain his glasses out as soon to luck." "Watch that," I said, as quiet as I could, with the stereo bouncing all over the walls and ceiling, and the inland Weg beyond Dim getting loud now with his spark nearer automatum. I said, do watch that, O Dim, if to continue to be on live thou dost wish. Yobbles, said Dim, sneering. Great broshy yobbles to you. What you done then you had no right. I'll meet you with chain or noses or breeders any time. Not having you aiming tall checks at me reasonless, it stands to reason I won't have. I'll scrap any time you say, I snarled back. Pete said, oh, now don't both of you Melcheks. Droogs, aren't we? It isn't right. Droogs should behave thuswise. See there? Are some loose-lipped Melcheks over there smacking at us, leering like. We mustn't let ourselves down. Dim, I said, has got to learn his place. Right. Wait, said Georgie, what's all this about place? This is the first I ever hear about Ludies learning their place. Pete said, if the truth is known, Alex, you shouldn't have given old Dim their uncalled for toll check. I'll say it once, no more. I say it with all respect, but if it had been me, you'd given it to, and you'd have to answer. I say no more. And he drowned his listo in the milk glass. I could feel myself getting all razzed-ass inside, but I tried to cover it up, saying calm, there has to be a leader. Discipline there has to be, right? None of them scazzed a word or nodded even. I got more razzed-ass inside. Calm her out. I said, have been in charge long now. We're all droogs, but somebody has to be in charge. Right? They all nodded way like. Dim was washing the last of the coffee off. It was Dim who said no. Right. Doobity-doo-doo. A bit tired maybe. Everybody is. Best not to say none. I was surprised in just that malanky bit poogy slush. Dim governing that wise. Dim said, bedways is right ways now, so best we go homeways, right? I was very surprised. The other two nodded. Going right, I said. You understand about the toll check on the right, Dim? It's the music, see? I get all bazoomby when any vac interest with Batista singing as it might be like that then interferes. Best we go off homeways and get a bit of spatchka, said Dim. A long night for growing melon chunks, right? Right, nodded the other two, I said. I think it's best we go home now. Dim has made a real horse show suggestion. If we don't meet daywise, oh my brothers, well then, same time, same place tomorrow. Oh yes, said Georgie, I think that can be arranged. I might, said Dim, be just that a bit late, but same place and near same time tomorrow, surely. He was still warping away at the goober, though no croway flowed from it any longer now, and he said, it's to be hoped there won't be no more of them singing priesters in here. Then he gave his old Dim gruff a clowny big boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Seemed like he was too dim to take much offense. So off we went our several ways, me belching og on the cold coke I'd peated. I had my cutthroat briefta handy in case any of the Billy Borg's droogs should be round near the flat back waiting, or for that matter any of the other bandas or groupers or shikas that from time to time were at war with one. Where I lived was with my dada and mum in the flats of Municipal Flatback 18A between Kingsley Avenue and Wilson's Way. I got to the big main door with no trouble, though I did pass one young Melchek sprawling and cretching and moaning to the gutter all cut about lovely, and saw in the lamplight also streaks of blood here and there like signatures, my brothers, of the night's filling. And two I saw just by 18A, a pair of Delcheka's nezes, doubtless running wrenched off in the heat of the moment. Oh, my brothers! And so in the hallway was the good old municipal painting on the walls, Vex and Batistas very well developed, stern in dignity of labour, at workbench and machine, with not one stitch of platies on their well-developed plotties. But of course some of the Melcheks living in 18A had, as was to be expected, embellished and decorated the said big platies with handy pencil and ballpoint, adding hair and stiff rods and dirty ballooning slavos out of the dignified rots of those Nogany, Bear, that is, Cheesnas and Vex. I went to the lift, but there was no need to press the electric napka to see if it was working or not, because it had not been toll-checked real horse-show this night. The metal door all buckled, some feet of rare strength indeed. So I had to walk on the 10 floors up. I cursed and panted climbing, being tired to plot if not so much in brain. I wanted music very bad this evening, that singing Dutchka in the Crover having perhaps started me off. I wanted like a big feast of it before getting my passport stamped to my brothers at Sleep's frontier, and the strippy sheets lifted to me to let me through. I opened the door of 10A with my own little clutch, and inside our Malenki quarters all was quiet, the P&M both being in sleepland, and Mum had laid out on the table my Malenki bit of supper, a couple of lunatics of tinned sponge meat with a shive or so of cleb and butter, a glass of the old cold Moloko. Ho, 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 the old Moloko with no knives or synthesec or drachrome in it. How wicked, my brothers! Innocent milk must always seem to be now. Still, I drank and ate growling, being more hungry than I thought at first, and I got fruit pie from the larder and tore chunks of it to stuff into my greedy rot. Then I tooth-cleaned and clicked, cleaning out the old rot with my yeskick or tongue. Then I went into my little room or den, easing off my platies as I did so. Here was my bed and my stereo, pride of my Jesney, and my discs in their cupboard, and banners and flags on the wall, these being like remembrances of my corrective school life since I was 11. Oh, my brothers! Each one shining and blazoned with some name or other: South 4, Metro Coastal Blue Division, the Boys of Alpha. The little speakers of my stereo were all arranged round the room, on ceiling, walls, floor, so lying on my bed, sloshing the music, I was like netted and meshed in the orchestra. Now what I fancied first tonight was the new violin concerto by the American Geoffrey Platius, played by Odysseus Cherylus, and the Macon, Georgia Philharmonic. So I slid it from when it was neatly filled and switched on and waited. Then, brothers, it came. Oh, bliss, bliss and heaven! I lay all noggy to the ceiling, my Gulliver or my Ruckles on the pillow, glazes closed, wrought open in bliss, sloshy in the sluice of lovely sounds. Oh, it was gorgeousness and gorgeosity made flesh. The trombones crunched red gold under my bed, and behind my Gulliver the trumpets 3 wise silver flamed, and there by the door the timps rolling through my guts and out again crutched like candy thunder. Oh, it was wonder of wonders. And then a bird of like rarest spun heaven metal, or like silvery wine flowing in a spaceship. Gravity, old nonsense now, came the violin solo above all the other strings. And those strings were like a cage of silk around my bed. Then flute and oboe bowled like worms of like platinum into the thick, thick trough, gold and silver. I was in such bliss, my brothers. P and M in their bedroom next door had learnt now not to knock on the wall with complaints of what they called noise. I had taught them. Now they would take sleep pills. Perhaps knowing the joy I had in my night music, they had already taken them. As I sloshied, my glasses were tight shut to shut in the bliss that was much better than any synthesec. Bog, oh God, I knew such lovely pictures. There were Vex and Batistas, both young and starry, lying on the ground screaming for mercy, and I was smacking all over my rot and grinding my boot in their listos. And there were Dutchkas ripped and cretching against walls, and I plunging like a schlager into them, and indeed when the music, which was one movement only, rose to the top of its big highest tower, then lying there on my bed with glasses tight shut and rookers behind my Gulliver, I broke and spattered and cried, and the bliss of it. And so the lovely music glided to its glowing close. After that I had a lovely Mozart, the Jupiter, and there were new pictures of different listos to be ground and splashed. And it was after this that I thought I would have just one last disc, only before crossing the border. And I wanted something starry and strong and very firm, so it was Johann Sebastian Bach I had, and the Brandenburg Concerto just for middle and lower strings. And sloshing with different bliss than before, I vidded again this name on the paper I'd resed that night, a long time ago it seemed, in that cottage called home. The name was about a clockwork orange. Listening to the Johann Sebastian Bach, I began to pony better what that meant now, and I thought, sloshing away to the brown gorgeousness of the starry German master, that I would like to have toll-checked them both harder and ripped them to ribbons on their own floor.